Good day. In this video, we'll be going over the various settings of Searchlight and common questions surrounding them. To start, I'm going to select a job and go to the Document Settings tab. The first settings we'll be looking at are the PDF selection settings. The first setting is simply to say if you want to process PDFs or not. Then for the other four settings, these are the types of PDFs that we are searching for. Image only is defined as PDFs that have no computer searchable text in them. An example of an image-only PDF is a scanned document or a photo. Partially searchable are documents which have pages that have computer searchable text on them and images, a combination of both. A fully searchable document is a document that has searchable text on every single page. Then finally, hidden text. Hidden text documents will be PDFs that may have been previously OCR'd by other applications. For the images, TIFF, BMP, JPEG, and PNG, all the settings perform the same functions. The first setting being whether to process that file type, and the second setting is if you wish to delete the original image. The reason the delete original image setting exists is when OCRing PDFs, it will simply overwrite the PDF. But seeing as we're generating PDF files, it is impossible to overwrite an image with a PDF. The temp folder is simply the location in which files will be temporarily put while they're being processed by Searchlight. The date filter can be used if you wish to only process files before or after a certain date, using the from and to fields accordingly. You can exclude specific documents by putting their addresses or locations. You can also filter documents by a regular expression. If Searchlight were to encounter an error, you can also take additional action. They can be uploaded to all the same types of locations Searchlight can process. The advanced settings, the first one, retry on error. If Searchlight were to have a problem running a file the first time it processes, the second time Searchlight runs, it will attempt to process it again and will continue to do so until either it is successful or the setting is turned off. The OCR document limit is one we highly recommend to customers who are processing extremely large volumes. This allows you to limit how many files Searchlight will process in one go. For example, if you had a 100,000 document library and you had the OCR limit set to 1,000 and you ran Searchlight, it would continue to process until it processed 1,000 files and then it would stop, awaiting its next scheduled run or manual run. The retain creation and modified date and creation and modified by are used generally by departments who have strict requirements and audit trails. Enabling these settings would show the document history as the last human modifier rather than Searchlight. Archival settings are very useful for the very similar reasons. If you wanted to keep unaltered PDFs and the original source images in a separate library, you can enable these settings and adjust as necessary. The OCR settings. By default, we recommend the extended engine. We'll go over the standard engine in a moment. Many of the settings are self-explanatory, but to quickly go over them. Auto-rotate is used if documents were scanned in the wrong orientation or are generally 90 degrees offset or 180 degrees offset to where they should be. Dark borders will attempt to remove scanning artifacts if you are scanning a page from a book that would cause a dark edge around the document, or if there are otherwise dark borders placed through whatever medium created the image or page. Hole punch removal will attempt to locate, identify, and then remove dark circles placed by hole punches. Perspective correction is helpful if you have taken an image with a camera and the document is not perfectly aligned. If embed font subset is enabled, Searchlight will attempt to identify fonts that are not used in the PDF and strip them out of the document. Helpful depending on how the documents were procured and previously modified. Blank page will attempt to identify pages that have no useful information on them. There are some settings here to adjust the sensitivity. Skew is used for documents that are slightly misaligned, that are 5, 10, or occasionally 15 degrees tilted to how they should be. Despeckle will attempt to identify small pixels, blemishes, or dirt that may have been on the scanner and remove it. If the document is inverted and primarily black, you can enable this setting to do the same but for lighter pixels. The Keep Original Image setting, which is on by default, will force Searchlight to not preserve any of the changes except for the OCR engine. All of these settings will be applied to the OCR, but the output will look the same. However, if you disable it, you can be rather granular with what settings you want to enable and disable. For example, these settings will mean that the image will only appear deskewed and despeckled. The PDF source settings. These are helpful in terms of processing PDFs that may be too large or may not be OCRing correctly. The first setting is DPI. This one is most often used for exceedingly large documents or exceedingly small documents, or photos and sometimes even scanned documents which have been incorrectly saved with the wrong DPI. Force vector check will force Searchlight to rasterize vectors for the OCR engine and OCR vector objects as text. This is most commonly used with AutoCAD files, as AutoCAD files do not use traditional fonts. Reimage Pdf. This is helpful to remove processing or other hidden elements from PDFs that Searchlight may not have initially identified, or that may be conflicting with other aspects of the process. What reimaging the PDF does is it flattens everything on the PDF into a single image. With the Reimage PDF enabled, we can see various settings to retain various parts of the PDF, as well as adjusting the compression methods. The first one is choosing what PDF version we would like to convert to. The reason Reimage Pdf must be enabled for this is because it's the only way our application can guarantee that the document is compliant to these standards. You can also validate the PDF to make sure it is the version and throw an error if not. You can retain various parts of the PDF metadata. You can choose to enable compression. There are 3 different options for compression. For image PDFs, we can see that the PDF version is already available as we're already starting with an image. And we've got the compression methods we saw previously. Advanced pre-processing. These are the advanced pre-processing settings. I won't go into exactly what all of these features do, as they are often quite complicated and are quite involved if you were to modify them. Generally speaking, the defaults should work best for most customers, but if you're dealing with particularly difficult documents, you may want to adjust the settings here, although it may require a lot of trial and error, or contact with our development team. The standard OCR engine is often used as a fallback if the extended is failing. Situations where the standard engine might be useful is if there are documents that may cause the extended engine to crash, or documents that are too large for the extended engine to process. The amount of customizability in the standard engine, however, is very limited. We have already gone over auto-rotate and de-skew. Remove lines will attempt to identify lines that are not text in the document and remove them for the OCR process. This is already on by default in the extended engine in the advanced settings. We have already gone over embed font subset. The speckle. This setting is equivalent to the keep despeckle setting in the extended engine. You have your language options, as well as various other settings. The next page is a scheduler. Most of this is self-explanatory. This allows you to have Searchlight run automatically at specific times and specific intervals. You can also select it to run only a single time on a specific date. Searchlight can also be configured to send alerts based on various triggers. Finally, in the library settings, there are not many settings to go over here, but you can exclude and filter locations, much like you can exclude and filter documents. You can process SharePoint lists, and if versioning is enabled in the SearchPoint library, you can enable it here as well, and adjust the checking comments and if it publishes a major version. I hope this answers most of your questions. Thank you for watching.